Hi, hello. I'm Elemental Owlet. You can call me Ellie. And today is our 35 follower special stream where I'm going to be reading cat memes. Hold on, what's his name? Let me look at the tab. Oh, Aesop, Fables, and then we're going to look at some poetry. And the reason I'm doing this is because a lot of people like my voice, stuff like that. So let me hop in my Twitch chat. There we go. And then I'll just get to reading. I prepared a whole presentation for this. Yes, it is just of cat memes, but who cares? And you're not one to judge, so. Alright, let's go. Gotta switch it up. Live screen. There we are. Don't look at my photos. What the heck? Alright. Hold on, it's not switching. Oh, there we go. Cool. Alright. I can't have cheeseburger? Alright, someone followed. Hold on, I gotta switch it up real quick. Freddie, thank you for following. Alright, let me finish up with what I was doing here. More cat memes. Alright, this is the button. Cool. Octopus cat is at rest. Oh, hi, I buffed your floor. Crap. I made you a cookie, but I eated it. Best sock ever. Rescue cat do rescues. Oh, he's got a little shark or something. I can't tell without the top fins. Levitation. I has it. Oh, this is a two-parter. Oh, hi. I done the sums. We can buy another cheeseburger. My precious. Shunning. Alright, just checking that it's working on my phone. Monorail cat. Monorail cat. Ideal kitty method of traveling, though never on time and often out of service. He looks very cute. Alright, this button. Monorail kitty. All lift for repairs. Monorail cat has emergency air brake. Is my own hair. This is the one that I put on my Twitter post for the 35 follower special. Love to see it. Great hair. Explain, please. Spycam installed and functioning. I'm confused. We didn't get our wigs in there, I promise. Alright. Think two more. Thermostat cat. Is not made of monies. Put on a sweater. Return to sender. Needs help? I can do Photoshop. Alright, so that's enough of the presentation. That's all I had. You can look at all of them here. Just take a second to admire them. I'll even go over here. There we are. Okay, cool. Admired. Let me go to my OBS and switch sources. I think this is how I do it. There we are. The Aesop for children. A list of the fables. And we're just gonna go down the list. Alright. The frogs and the ox. The frogs and the ox. An ox came down to a reedy pool to drink. As he splashed heavily into the water, he crushed a young frog into the mud. The old frog soon missed little one and asked his brothers and sisters what had become of him. A great big monster, said one of them, stepped on little brother with one of his huge feet. Big, was he? Said the old frog, puffing herself up. Was he as big as this? Oh, much bigger, they cried. The frog puffed up still more. He could not have been bigger than this, she said, but the little frogs all declared that the monster was much, much bigger, and the old frog kept puffing herself out more and more until all at once she burst. Do not attempt the impossible. Click on the orange frog to begin. And we got a little animation, I believe. Bigger. Oh, well, I don't like those sound effects. But okay. Alright. I was just clicking it twice to be sure that there wasn't any more. Alright. Belling the cat. Second story already. Alright, I know this one. The mice once called a meeting to decide on a plan to free themselves of their enemy, the cat. At least they wished to find some way of knowing when she was coming, so they might have time to run away. Indeed, something had to be done, for they lived in such constant fear of her claws, and they hardly dared stir from their dens by night or day. Many plans were discussed, but none of them was thought good enough. At last a very young mouse got up and said, "I have a plan that seems very simple, but I know it will be successful. All we have to do is to hang a bell around the cat's neck. When we hear the bell ringing, we will know immediately that our enemy is coming." All the mice were much surprised that they had not thought of such a plan before, but in the midst of the rejoicing over their good fortune, an old mouse arose and said, "I will say that the plan of the young mouse is very good, but let me ask one question. Who will bell the cat? It is one thing to say that something should be done, but quite a different matter to do it." All right, another one. Going back. Actually, okay, I have this favorited, it's right here. So instead of going back each time, we'll just click this. The town mouse and the country mouse. Haven't heard of this one, so this will be interesting. The town mouse and the country mouse. A town mouse once visited a relative who lived in the country. For lunch, the country mouse served wheat stalks, roots, and acorns, with a dash of cold water for drink. The town mouse ate very sparingly, nibbling a little of this and a little of that, and by her manner making it very plain that she ate the simple food only to be polite. After the meal, the friends had a long talk, or rather, the town mouse talked about her life in the city, while the country mouse listened. They then went to bed in a cozy nest in the hedgerow, and slept in quiet and comfort until morning. In her sleep, the country mouse dreamed she was a town mouse, with all the luxuries and delights of city life, that her friend had described for her. So the next day, when the town mouse asked the country mouse to go home with her to the city, she gladly said yes. When they reached the mansion in which the town mouse lived, they found on the table in the dining room the leavings of a very fine banquet. There were sweetmeats and jellies, pastries, delicious cheese, indeed, the most tempting foods that a mouse can imagine. But just as the country mouse was able to nibble a dainty bit of pastry, she heard a cat mew loudly and scratch at the door. In great fear, the mice scurried to a hiding place, where they lay quite still for a long time, hardly daring to breathe. When at last they ventured back to the feast, the door opened suddenly, and in came the servants to clear the table, followed by the house dog, another enemy. The country mouse stopped in the town's mouse den only long enough to pick up her carpet bag and umbrella. "You may have luxuries and dainties that I have not," she said as she hurried away, "but I prefer my plain food and simple life in the country with the peace and security that go with it. Poverty with security is better than plenty in the midst of fear and uncertainty." And Anisha joined the chat. "Hi, I'm here. I won't be typing. I'm going to be listening." That's fine. That's kind of what this is for. Just sit back and relax. Is there another animation? I don't think so. Unfortunate, but something I was expecting. All right, the fox and the grapes. A fox one day spied a beautiful bunch of ripe grapes hanging from a vine trained along the branches of a tree. The grapes seemed ready to burst with juice, and the fox's mouth watered as he gazed longingly at them. The bunch hung from a high branch, and the fox had to jump for it. The first time he jumped, he missed it by a long way. So he walked off a short distance and took a running leap at it, only to fall short once more. Again and again he tried, but in vain. Now he sat down and looked at the grapes in disgust. "What a fool I am," he said. "Here I am wearing myself out to get a bunch of sour grapes that are not worth gaping for." And off he walked, very, very scornfully. There are many who pretend to despise and belittle that which is beyond their reach. And a little animation. Oh, it's 30 seconds. Cool. Do you hear the birds? I'm confused. Am I supposed to see something? Well, I'm sorry you can't see anything, but I hope you're enjoying the sound effects. What the heck? That's not cool. Alright, we're just gonna go to the next one because this isn't working for some reason. The Wolf and the Crane. A wolf had been feasting too greedily, and a bone had stuck crosswise in his throat. He could get it neither up nor down. And of course he could not eat a thing. Naturally, that was an awful state of affairs for a greedy wolf. So away he hurried to the Crane. He was sure that she, with her long neck and bill, would easily be able to reach the bone and pull it out. "I will reward you very handsomely," said the wolf, "if you pull that bone out for me." The Crane, as you can imagine, was very uneasy about putting her head in a wolf's throat, but she was grasping in nature, so she did what the wolf asked her to do. When the wolf felt that the bone was gone, he started to walk away. "But what about my reward?" called the Crane anxiously. "What?" snarled the wolf, whirling around. "Haven't you got it? Isn't it enough that I let you take your head out of my mouth without snapping it off? Expect no reward for serving the wicked." Good moral. Another one. The Lion and the Mouse. Oh, we're gonna watch this first. Click on the orange mouse to begin. Oh, he's freeing him, supposedly. Nice. Okay, on with the story. A lion lay asleep in the forest, his great head resting on his paws. A timid little mouse came upon him unexpectedly, and in her fright and haste to get away, ran across the lion's nose. Roused from his nap, the lion laid his huge paw angrily on the tiny creature to kill her. "Spare me," begged the poor mouse. "Please let me go, and some day I will surely repay you." The lion was much amused to think that a mouse could ever help him, but he was generous and finally let the mouse go. Some days later, while stalking his prey in the forest, the lion was caught in the toils of a hunter's net. Unable to free himself, he filled the forest with his angry roaring. The mouse knew the voice and quickly found the lion struggling in the net. Running to one of the great ropes that bound him, she gnawed it until it parted, and soon the lion was free. "You laughed when I said I would repay you," said the mouse. "Now you see that even a mouse can help a lion. A kindness is never wasted." All right, where were we? The Gnat and the Bull. Oh, never heard of this one either. The Gnat and the Bull. A gnat flew over the meadow with much buzzing for so small a creature, and settled on the tip of one of the horns of a bull. After he had rested a short time, he made ready to fly away, but before he left he begged the bull's pardon for having used his horn for a resting place. "You must be very glad to have me go now," he said. "It's all the same to me," replied the bull. "I did not even know you were there. We are often of greater importance in our own eyes than in the eyes of our neighbor. The smaller the mind, the greater the conceit." Oh, and it's just buzzing around. Okay, cool. You don't even have to click. Love to see it. I wonder how many stories there are. Can we read all of them tonight? Probably not, but we'll see. The Plane Tree. Two travelers walking in the noonday sun sought the shade of a wide-spreading tree to rest. As they lay, looking up among the pleasant leaves, they saw that it was a plane tree. "How useless is the plane," said one of them. "It bears no fruit whatever. It bears no fruit whatever, and only serves to litter the ground with leaves." "Ungrateful creatures," said a voice from the plane tree. "You lie here in my cooling shade, and yet you say I am useless. Thus ungratefully, O Jupiter, do men receive their blessings. Our best blessings are often the least appreciated." Also, since it's the 35 follower special, go ahead and ask me a couple of questions, because a lot of you guys probably don't don't know who the heck I am, and that's totally okay. And I'm Ellie, by the way. The owl and the grasshopper, elemental owlet. Here's my rep. Alright, it's me. The owl and the grasshopper. The owl always takes her sleep during the day. Then after sundown, when the rosy light fades from the sky and the shadows rise slowly through the wood, out she comes ruffling and blinking from the old hollow tree. Now her weird hoo-hoo-hoo echoes through the quiet wood, and she begins her hunt for the bugs and beetles, frogs and mice she likes so well to eat. Now there was a certain old owl who had become very cross and hard to please as she grew older, especially if anything disturbed her daily slumbers. One warm summer afternoon, as she dozed away in her den in the old oak tree, a grasshopper nearby began a joyous but very raspy song. Out popped the old owl's head from the opening in the tree that served her both for door and for window. "Get away from here, sir," she said to the grasshopper. "Have you no manners? You should at least respect my age and leave me to sleep in quiet." But the grasshopper answered saucily that he had as much right to his place in the sun as the owl had to her place in the old oak. Then he struck up a louder and still more rasping tune. The wise old owl knew quite well that it would do no good to argue with the grasshopper, nor with anybody else for that matter. Besides, her eyes were not sharp enough by day to permit her to punish the grasshopper as he deserved. So she laid aside all hard words and spoke very kindly to him. "Well, sir," she said, "if I must stay awake, I am going to settle right down to enjoy your singing. Now that I think of it, I have a wonderful wine here, sent me from Olympus, of which I am told Apollo drinks before he sings to the high gods. Please come up and taste this delicious drink with me. I know it will make you sing like Apollo himself." The foolish grasshopper was taken in by the owl's flattering words. Up he jumped to the owl's den, but as soon as he was near enough so the old owl could see him clearly, she pounced upon him and ate him up. Flattery is not proof of true admiration. Do not let flattery throw you off your guard against an enemy. The oak and the reeds. Click on the orange wind to begin. Oh, poor tree. Fine by me, I guess. A giant oak stood near a brook in which grew some slender reeds. When the wind blew, the great oak stood proudly upright when its 100 arms uplifted to the sky. But the reeds bowed low in the wind and sang a sad and mournful song. "You have reason to complain," said the oak. "The slightest breeze that ruffles the surface of the water makes you blow your heads, while I, the mighty oak, stand upright and firm before the howling tempest." "Do not worry about us," replied the reeds. "The winds do not harm us. We bow before them, and so we do not break. You, in all your pride and strength, have so far resisted their blows, but the end is coming." As the reeds spoke, a great hurricane rushed out of the north. The oak stood proudly and fought against the storm, while the yielding reeds bowed low. The wind redoubled in fury, and all at once the great tree fell, torn up by the roots, and lay among the pitying reeds. Better to yield when it is folly to resist, than to resist stubbornly and be destroyed. Okay, another one. Let's count. How many have we done? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Wow, and it's only 8:21. The crow and the pitcher. Alright, let's click the stone and see what happens. The crow puts a stone in the pitcher. Nice. In a spell of dry weather, when the birds could find very little to drink, a thirsty crow found a pitcher with a little water in it. But the pitcher was high and had a narrow neck. And no matter how he tried, the crow could not reach the water. The poor thing felt as if he must die of thirst. Then an idea came to him. Picking up some small pebbles, he dropped them into the pitcher, one by one. With each pebble, the water rose a little higher until at last it was near enough so he could drink. In a pinch, a good use of our wits may help us out. The Two Goats. Two goats, frisking gaily on the rocky steeps of a mountain valley, chanced to meet, one on each side of a deep chasm, through which poured a mighty mountain torrent. The trunk of a fallen tree formed the only means of crossing the chasm, and on this not even two squirrels could have passed each other in safety. The narrow path would have made the bravest tremble. Not so our goats, their pride would not permit either to stand aside for the other. One set her foot on the log, the other did likewise. In the middle they met horn to horn. Neither would give way, and so they both fell, to be swept away by the roaring torrent below. It is better to yield than to come to misfortune through stubbornness. And I'm so glad I noticed that there's a next button in the top right corner, because that's a lot of clicking backs. Okay. The Wild Boar and the Fox. A wild boar was sharpening his tusks busily against the stump of a tree, when a fox happened by. It's always the fox. Now the fox was always looking for a chance to make fun of his neighbors, so he made a great show of looking anxiously about, as if in fear of some hidden enemy. But the boar kept right on with his work. "Why are you doing that?" asked the fox at last with a grin. "There isn't any danger that I can see here." "True enough," replied the boar, "but when danger does come, there will not be a time for such work as this. My weapons will have to be ready for use then, or I shall suffer for it. Preparedness for war is the best guarantee of peace." Oh, and it's also down here. Sweet. The Heron. A heron was walking sedately along the bank of a stream, his eyes on the clear water, and his long neck and pointed bill ready to snap up a likely morsel for his breakfast. The clear water swarmed with fish, but Master Heron was hard to please that morning. "No small fry for me," he said. "Such scanty fare is not fit for a heron." Now a fine young perch swam near. "No, indeed," said the heron. "I wouldn't even trouble to open my beak for anything like that." As the sun rose, the fish left the shallow water near the shore, and swam below into the cool depths towards the middle. The heron saw no more fish, and very gladly was he at last to breakfast on a tiny snail. Do not be too hard to suit, or you may have to be content with the worst or with nothing at all. The Fox and the Stork. The fox one day thought of a plan to amuse himself at the expense of the stork, at whose odd appearance he was always laughing. "You must come and dine with me today," he said to the stork, smiling to himself at the trick he was going to play. The stork gladly accepted the invitation and arrived in good time, and with a very good appetite. For dinner the fox served soup, but it was set out in a very shallow dish, and all the stork could do was wet the very tip of his bill. Not a drop of soup could he get. But the fox lapped it up easily, and to increase the disappointment of the stork, made a great show of his enjoyment. The hungry stork was much displeased at the trick, but he was a calm, even-tempered fellow, and saw no good in flying into a rage. Instead, not long after, he invited the fox to dine with him in turn. The fox arrived promptly at the time that had been set, and the stork served a fish dinner that had a very appetizing smell, but it was served in a tall jar with a very narrow neck. The stork could easily get at the food with his long bill, but all the fox could do was to lick the outside of the jar and sniff at the delicious odor. And when the fox lost his temper, the stork said calmly, "Do not play tricks on your neighbors unless you can stand the same treatment yourself." The Stag and His Reflection. A stag, drinking from a crystal spring, saw himself mirrored in the clear water. He greatly admired the graceful arch of his antlers, but he was very much ashamed of his spindling legs. "How can it be," he sighed, "that I should be cursed with such legs when I have such magnificent a crown?" At that moment he scented a panther and in an instant was bounding away through the forest. But as he ran his wide-spreading antlers caught in the branches of the trees, and soon the panther overtook him. Then the stag perceived that the legs of which he was so ashamed would have saved him, had he not been for the useless ornaments on his head. We often make such of the ornamental and despise the useful. These stories are deep. The Yeah and the Fox. One bright evening, as the sun was sinking on a glorious world, a wise old chicken flew into a tree to roost. Before he composed himself to rest, he flapped his wings 3 times and crowed loudly. But just as he was about to put his head under his wing, his beady eyes caught a flash of red and a glimpse of a long, pointed nose, and there just below him stood Master Fox. "Have you heard the wonderful news?" cried the Fox in a very joyful and excited manner. "What news?" asked the chicken very calmly, but he had a queer, fluttery feeling inside him, for you know, he was very much afraid of the Fox. "Your family and mine and all other animals have agreed to forget their differences and live in peace and friendship from now on forever. Just think of it! I simply cannot wait to embrace you. Do come down, dear friend, and let us celebrate the joyful event." "How grand!" said the chicken. "I certainly am delighted at the news." But he spoke in an absent way, and stretching up on tiptoes seemed to be looking at something afar off. "What is it you see?" asked the Fox a little anxiously. "Why, it looks to me like a couple of dogs coming this way. They must have heard the good news and—" But the Fox did not wait to hear more. Off he started on a run. "Wait!" cried the chicken. "Why do you run? The dogs are friends of yours now." "Yes," answered the Fox, "but they might not have heard the news. Besides, I have a very important errand that I had almost forgotten about." The chicken smiled as he buried his head in his feathers and went to sleep, for he had succeeded in outwitting a very crafty enemy. The trickster is easily tricked. Okay. The Fox and the Goat. A fox fell into a well, and though it was not very deep, he found that he could not get out again. After he had been in the well a long time, a thirsty goat came by. The goat thought the fox had gone down to drink, and so he asked if the water was good. "The finest in the whole country," said the crafty fox. "Jump in and try it. There is more than enough for both of us." The thirsty goat immediately jumped in and began to drink. The fox just as quickly jumped on the goat's back and leaped from the tip of the goat's horns out of the well. The foolish goat now saw what a plight he had got into, and begged the fox to help him out, but the fox was already on his way to the woods. "If you had as much sense as you have beard, the old fellow," he said as he ran, "you would have been more cautious about finding a way to get out again before you jumped right in. Look before you leap." Click on the orange goat to begin. And with that, I'm going to take a sip of water because I feel like I've read 30 stories, but it might be just like 15. Alright, I'm good. The Fox and the Leopard. A fox and a leopard, resting lazily after a generous dinner, amused themselves by disputing about their good looks. The leopard was very proud of his glossy spotted coat, and made disdainful remarks about the fox, whose appearance he declared was quite ordinary. The fox prided himself on his fine bushy tail with its tip of white, but he was wise enough to see that he could not rival the leopard in looks. Still, he kept up a flow of sarcastic talk, just to exercise his wits and to have the fun of disputing. The leopard was about to lose his temper when the fox got up, yawning lazily. "You may have a very smart coat," he said, "but you would be a great deal better off if you had a little more smartness inside your head, and less on your ribs. The way I am. That's what I call real beauty." A fine coat is not always an indication of an attractive mind. Alright. Hold on, there's something happening with my Twitch chat. Let me X out and go back and it should be fixed. Alright, it's not gonna fix, but that's okay. The Frog and the Mouse. A young mouse in search of adventure was running along the bank of a pond where lived a frog. When the frog saw the mouse, he swam to the bank and croaked, "Won't you pay me a visit? I can promise you a good time if you do." The mouse did not need much coaxing, for he was very anxious to see the world and everything in it. But though he could swim a little, he did not dare risk going into the pond without some help. The frog had a plan. He tied the mouse's leg to his own with a tough reed. That doesn't seem like a good idea. Then into the pond he jumped, dragging his foolish companion with him. The mouse soon had enough of it and wanted to return to shore. But the treacherous frog had other plans. He pulled the mouse down under the water and drowned him. But before he could untie the reed that bound him to the dead mouse, a hawk came sailing over the pond. Seeing the body of the mouse floating on the water, the hawk swooped down, seized the mouse, and carried it off, with the frog dangling from its leg. Thus, at one swoop, he had caught both meat and fish for his dinner. Those who seek to harm others often come to harm themselves through their own deceit. Yeah, that's what you get, you frog. Okay. The Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. I'm sure we've all heard this story. It's a good one. Let me read it. A certain wolf could not get enough to eat because of the watchfulness of the shepherds. But one night he found a sheepskin that had been cast aside and forgotten. The next day, dressed in the skin, the wolf strolled into the pasture with the sheep. Soon a little lamb was following him about and was quickly led away to slaughter. That evening, the wolf entered the fold with a flock. But it happened that the shepherd took a fancy for mutton broth that very evening, and picking up a knife, went to the fold. There, the first he laid hands on and killed was the wolf. The evildoer often comes to harm through his own deceit. I feel like the other one said that. Something about deceit. Let's go read it. Yeah, it's very similar. Those who seek to harm others often come to harm themselves through their own deceit. Alright, so I was right about it being similar. Let's go 2 times forward. The Eagle and the Beetle. A beetle once begged the eagle to spare a hare which had run to her for protection. But the eagle pounced upon her prey, the sweep of her great wings tumbling the beetle a dozen feet away. Furious at the disrespect shown her, the beetle flew to the eagle's nest and rolled out the eggs. Not one did she spare. The eagle's grief and anger knew no bounds, but who had done the cruel deed she did not know. Next year, the eagle built her nest far up on a mountain crag, but the beetle found it and again destroyed the eggs. In despair, the eagle now implored great Jupiter to let her place her eggs in his lap. There none would dare harm them, but the beetle buzzed about Jupiter's head and made him rise to drive her away, and the eggs rolled from his lap. Now the beetle told the reason for her action, and Jupiter had to acknowledge the justice of her cause, and they say that even after, while the eagle's eggs lie in the nest in spring, the beetle still sleeps in the ground, for so Jupiter commanded. Click on the orange beetle to begin. And hey viewers, if you're getting bored and you want me to read some poetry, just recommend some random pieces. I'll pull it up on Google and then I'll read them for you, 'cause why not? And again, don't fear asking questions, 'cause I'm just here to talk. Alright. Even the weakest may find means to avenge a wrong. The Mother and the Wolf. Early one morning, a hungry wolf was prowling around a cottage at the edge of a village, when he heard a child crying in the house. Then he heard the mother's voice say, "Hush, child, hush! Stop your crying, or I will give you to the wolf." Surprised but delighted at the prospect of so delicious a meal, the wolf settled down under an open window, expecting every moment to have the child handed out to him. But though the little one continued to fret, the wolf waited all day in vain. Then toward nightfall he heard the mother's voice again, as she sat down near the window to sing and rock her baby to sleep. "There, child, there. The wolf shall not get you. No, no. Daddy is watching, and Daddy will kill him if he should come near." Just then, the father came within sight of the home, and the wolf was barely able to save himself from the dogs by a clever bit of running. Do not believe everything you hear. And let me just check my OBS to make sure my volume's good. I think it's pretty okay. And if my voice is silent, go ahead and let me know. Alright, back to it. The Hare and the Tortoise, another classic. A hare was making fun of the tortoise one day for being so slow. "Do you ever get anywhere?" he asked with a mocking laugh. "Yes," replied the tortoise, "and I get there sooner than you think. I'll run you a race and prove it." The hare was much amused at the idea of running a race with the tortoise, but for the fun of the thing he agreed. So the fox who had consented Where does the fox come in? What? Okay. So the fox, who had consented to act as judge, all right, that makes sense, marked the distance and started the runners off. The hare was soon far out of sight, and to make the tortoise feel very deeply how ridiculous it was for him to try a race with a hare, he lay down beside the course to take a nap, until the tortoise should catch up. The tortoise meanwhile kept going, slowly but steadily, and after a time passed the place where the hare was sleeping. But the hare slept on very peacefully, and when at last he did wake up, the tortoise was near the goal. The hare now ran his swiftest, but he could not overtake the tortoise in time. The race is not always to the swift. The Dog and His Reflection. A dog to whom the butcher had thrown a bone was hurrying home with his prize as fast as he could go. As he crossed a narrow footbridge, he happened to look down and saw himself reflected in the quiet water as if in a mirror. But the greedy dog thought he saw a real dog carrying a bone much bigger than his own. If he had stopped to think, he would have known better, but instead of thinking, he dropped his bone and sprang at the dog in the river, only to find himself swimming for dear life to reach the shore. At last, he managed to scramble out, and as he stood sadly thinking about the good bone he had lost, he realized what a stupid dog he had been. It is very foolish to be greedy. Alright, here's another animation. Click on the orange crow to begin. Oh, alright. So the crow's singing, and just because of that, something fell out of the beak and went to the fox. Alright, the fox and the crow. One bright morning, as the fox was following his sharp nose through the wood in search of a bite to eat, he saw a crow on the limb of a tree overhead. This was by no means the first crow the fox had ever seen. What caught his attention this time and made him stop for a second look was that the lucky crow held a bit of cheese in her beak. No need to search any farther, thought sly Master Fox. Here's a dainty bite for my breakfast. Up he trotted to the foot of the tree in which the crow was sitting, and looking up admiringly, he cried, "Good morning, beautiful creature." The crow, her head cocked on one side, watched the fox suspiciously, but she kept her beak tightly closed on the cheese, and did not return his greeting. "What a charming creature she is," said the fox. "How her feathers shine! What a beautiful form And what splendid wings! Such a wonderful bird should have a very lovely voice, since everything else about her is so perfect. Could she sing just one song? I know, I should hail her Queen of Birds. Listening to these flattering words, the crow forgot all of her suspicion, and also her breakfast. She wanted very much to be called Queen of Birds, so she opened her beak wide to utter her loudest caw, and down fell the cheese straight into the fox's open mouth. "Thank you," said Master Fox sweetly, as he walked off. "Though it is cracked you have a voice sure enough. But where are your wits? The flatterer lives at the expense of those who will listen to him." Bard energy. The Ant and the Dove. A dove saw an ant fall into a brook. The ant struggled in vain to reach the bank, and in pity, the dove dropped a blade of straw close beside it, clinging to the straw like a shipwrecked sailor to a broken spar. The ant floated safely to shore. Soon after, the ant saw a man getting ready to kill the dove with a stone, but just as he cast the stone, the ant stung him in the heel, so that the pain made him miss his aim, and the startled dove flew to safety in a distant wood. A kindness is never wasted. And let's see the animation. Nice. Oh my god, I love satyrs. Okay. I want to play one of these in D&D, but moving on. The Man and the Satyr. A long time ago, a man met a satyr in the forest, and succeeded in making friends with him. The two soon became the best of comrades, living together in the man's hut. But one cold winter evening, as they were walking homeward, the satyr saw the man blow on his fingers. "Why do you do that?" asked the satyr. "To warm my hands," the man replied. When they reached home, the man prepared 2 bowls of porridge. These he placed steaming hot on the table, and the comrades sat down very cheerfully to enjoy the meal. But much to the satyr's surprise, the man began to blow into his bowl of porridge. "Why do you do that?" he asked. "To cool my porridge," replied the man. The satyr sprang hurriedly to his feet and made for the door. "Good-bye," he said. "I've seen enough. A fellow that blows hot and cold in the same breath cannot be friends with me. The man who talks for both sides is not to be trusted by either." Ooh, the hare and his ears. The lion had been badly hurt by the horns of a goat, which he was eating. He was very angry to think that any animal that he chose for a meal should be so brazen as to wear such dangerous things as horns to scratch him while he ate. So he commanded that all animals with horns should leave his domain within 24 hours. The command struck terror among the beasts. All those who were so unfortunate as to have horns began to pack up and move out. Even the hare, who, as you know, has no horns and so had nothing to fear, passed a very restful night, dreaming awful dreams about the fearful lion. And when he came out of the warren in the early morning sunshine, and there saw the shadow cast by his long and pointed ears, a terrible fright seized him. "Good-bye, neighbor Cricket," he called. "I'm off. He will certainly make out that my ears are horns no matter what I say." Do not give your enemies the slightest reason to attack your reputation. Your enemies will seize any excuse to attack you. The Fisherman and the Little Fish. A poor fisherman, who lived on the fish he caught, had bad luck one day, and caught nothing but a very small fry. The fisherman was about to put it in his basket when the little fish said, "Please spare me, Mr. Fisherman. I am so small it is not worth while to carry me home. When I am bigger, I shall make you a much better meal." But the fisherman quickly put the fish into his basket. "How foolish I should be," he said, "to throw you back. However small you may be, you are better than nothing at all. A small gain is worth more than a large promise." The Wolf and the Kid. Oh, okay, a goat this time, not a real human kid. There was once a little kid whose growing horns made him think he was a grown-up billy goat and able to take care of himself. So one evening, when the flock started home from the pasture and his mother called, the kid paid no heed and kept right on nibbling the tender grass. A little later, when he lifted his head, the flock was gone. He was all alone. The sun was sinking. Long shadows came creeping over the ground. A chilly little wind came creeping with them, making scary noises in the grass. The kid shivered as he thought of the terrible wolf. Then he started wildly over the field, bleating for his mother, but not halfway, near a clump of trees, there was the wolf. The kid knew there was little hope for him. "Please, Mr. Wolf," he said, "I know you are going to eat me, but first please pipe me a tune, for I want to dance and be merry as long as I can." The wolf liked the idea of a little music before eating, so he struck up a merry tune, and the kid leaped and frisked gaily. Meanwhile, the flock was moving slowly homeward. In the still evening air, the wolf's piping carried far. The shepherd's dogs pricked up their ears. They recognized the song the wolf sings before a feast, and in a moment they were racing back to the pasture. The wolf's song ended suddenly, and as he ran, with the dogs at his heels, he called himself a fool for turning piper to please the kid, when he should have stuck to his butcher's trade, my bad. Do not let anything turn you from your purpose. Ooh, this one looks interesting. The Tortoise and the Ducks. The tortoise, you know, carries his house on his back. No matter how hard he tries, he cannot leave home. They say that Jupiter punished him so, because he was such a lazy stay-at-home, that he would not go to Jupiter's wedding, even when especially invited. After many years, Tortoise began to wish he had gone to that wedding, when he saw how gaily the birds flew about, and how the hare and the chipmunk and all the other animals ran nimbly by, always eager to see everything there was to be seen. The tortoise felt very sad and discontented. He wanted to see the world too, and there he was with the house on his back and little short legs that could hardly drag him along. One day he met a pair of ducks and told them all his trouble. "We can help you to see the world," said the ducks. "Take hold of the stick with your teeth, and we will carry you far up in the air where you can see the whole countryside. But keep quiet, or you will be sorry." The tortoise was very glad indeed. He seized the stick firmly with his teeth. The two ducks took hold of it, one at each end, and away they sailed up towards the clouds. Just then a crow flew by. He was very much astonished at this strange sight and cried, "This must surely be the king of tortoises." "Why, certainly," began the tortoise, but as he opened his mouth to say these foolish words, he lost his hold on the stick, and down he fell to the ground, where he was dashed to pieces on a rock. That is very unfortunate. Foolish curiosity and vanity often leads to misfortune. A crab and a mother crab. Love that. Okay. The young crab and his mother. This one's a little short. "Why in the world do you walk sideways like that?" said a mother crab to her son. "You should always walk straight forward with your toes turned out." "Show me how to walk, mother dear," answered the little crab obediently. "I want to learn." So the old crab tried to walk straight forward, but she could walk sideways only, like her son. And when she wanted to turn her toes out, she tripped and fell on her nose. Do not tell others how to act, unless you can set a good example. I like that one a lot. They gave the crab shoes. I love that for them. Look at them. Blue shoes, pink shoes. All right. The dog, the chicken, and the fox. A dog and a chicken who were the best of friends wished very much to see something of the world, so they decided to leave the farmyard and to set out into the world along the road that led to the woods. The two comrades travelled along in the very best of spirits, and without meeting any adventure to speak of. At nightfall, the chicken, looking for a place to roost, as was his custom, spied nearby a hollow tree that he thought would do very nicely for a night's lodging. The dog could creep inside, and the chicken would fly up on one of the branches. So said, so done, and both slept very comfortably. With the first glimmer of dawn, the chicken awoke. For the moment he forgot just where he was. He thought he was still in the farmyard where he had been. His duty to arouse the household at daybreak. Oh no! So standing on tiptoes, he flapped his wings and crowed lustily. But instead of awakening the farmer, he awakened a fox, not far off in the wood. The fox immediately had rosy visions of a very delicious breakfast. Hurrying to the tree where the chicken was roosting, he said very politely, "A hearty welcome to our woods, honored sir. I cannot tell you how glad I am to see you here. I am quite sure we shall become the closest of friends." "I feel highly flattered, kind sir," replied the chicken slyly. "If you will please go round to the door of my house at the foot of the tree, my porter will let you in." The hungry but unsuspecting fox went around the tree as he was told, and in a twinkling the dog had seized him. Those who try to deceive may expect to be paid in their own coin. And click on the orange tree. Rip the fox. And I hope you guys are having a good time so far. Alrighty. The Eagle and the Jackdaw. An eagle, swooping down on powerful wings, seized a lamb in her talons and made off with it to her nest. A jackdaw saw the deed, and his silly head was filled with the idea that he was big and strong enough to do as the eagle had done. So with much rustling of feathers and a fierce air, he came down swiftly on the back of a large ram. But when he tried to rise again, he found that he could not get away, for his claws were tangled in the wool, and so far was he from carrying away the ram, that the ram hardly noticed he was there. The shepherd saw the fluttering jackdaw, and at once guessed what had happened. Running up, he caught the bird and clipped its wings. That evening he gave the jackdaw to his children. "Oh no! What a funny bird this is," they said, laughing. "What do you call it, father?" "That is a jackdaw, my children. But if you should ask him, he would say he is an eagle. Do not let your vanity make you overestimate your powers." Ooh, another short one, and no visual. Kind of weird, but that's okay. The Boy and the Filberts. A boy was given permission to put his hand into a pitcher to get some filberts. But he took such a great fistful that he could not draw his hand out again. There he stood, unwilling to give up a single filbert, and yet unable to get them all out at once. Vexed and disappointed, he began to cry. "My boy," said his mother, "be satisfied with half the nuts you have taken, and you will easily get your hand out. Then perhaps you may have some more filberts some other time. Do not attempt too much at once." Hercules and the Wagoner. A farmer was driving his wagon along a miry country road after a heavy rain. The horses could hardly drag the load through the deep mud, and at last came to a standstill, when one of the wheels sank to the hub in a rut. The farmer climbed down from his seat and stood beside the wagon, looking at it, but without making the least effort to get it out of the rut. All he did was to curse his bad luck and call loudly on Hercules to come to his aid. Then, it is said, Hercules really did appear, saying, "Put your shoulders to the wheel, man, and urge on your horses. Do you think you can move the wagon by simply looking at it and whining about it? Hercules will not help unless you make some effort to help yourself, as it should be." And when the farmer put his shoulder to the wheel and urged on the horses, the wagon moved very readily, and soon the farmer was riding along in great content and with a good lesson learned. Self-help is the best help. Heaven helps those who help themselves. The Kid and the Wolf. A frisky young kid had been left by the herdsman on the thatched roof of a sheep shelter to keep him out of harm's way. The kid was browsing near the edge of the roof when he spied a wolf and began to jeer at him, making faces and abusing him to his heart's content. "I hear you," said the fox, "and I haven't the least grudge against you for what you say or do. When you are up there, it is the roof that's talking, not you. Do not say anything at any time that you would not say at all times. Especially true for the things you say online." The Bundle of Sticks. A certain father had a family of sons who were forever quarrelling among themselves. No words he could say did the least good, so he cast about in his mind for some very striking example that should make them see that discord would lead them to misfortune. One day, when the quarrelling had been much more violent than usual, and each of the sons was moping in a surly manner, he asked one of them to bring him a bundle of sticks. Then handing the bundle to each of his sons in turn, he told them to try to break it, but although each one tried his best, none was able to do so. The father then untied the bundles, and gave the sticks to his sons to break one by one. This they did very easily. "My sons," said the father, "do you not see how certain it is that if you agree with each other and help each other, it will be impossible for your enemies to injure you? But if you are divided among yourselves, you will be no stronger than a single stick in that bundle. In unity there is strength." All right, one more, and then I'm going to take like a 10-minute break, just so my voice doesn't completely perish. Okay, the ass and his driver, and in this case, it's a donkey. An ass was being driven along a road leading down the mountainside, when he suddenly took it into his silly head to choose his own path. He could see his stall at the foot of the mountain, and to him the quickest way down seemed to be over the edge of the nearest cliff. Just as he was about to leap over, his master caught him by the tail and tried to pull him back, but the stubborn ass would not yield, and pulled him with all his might. "Very well," said his master, "go your way, you wilful beast, and see where it leads you." With that he let go, and the foolish ass tumbled head over heels down the mountain side. They who will not listen to reason, but stubbornly go their own way against the friendly advice of those who are wiser than they, are on the road to misfortune. Alright, I'm going to switch my screens. Be right back. Give me 10 minutes. Alrighty, chat, can you hear me? I'm back. I took a 5-minute break instead of a 10-minute break just because I felt like it was going on a little too long. So here we are, back to the live screen. Oh, wrong one. There we go. And I'll reread the last line. They who will not listen to reason, but stubbornly go their own way against the friendly advice of those who are wiser than they, are on the road to misfortune. Alright, on to the next story. The Oxen and the Wheels. A pair of oxen were drawing a heavily loaded wagon along a miry country road. They had to use all their strength to pull the wagon, but they did not complain. The wheels of the wagon were of a different sort, though the task they had to do was very light compared with that of the oxen. They creaked and groaned at every turn, the poor oxen pulling with all their might to draw the wagon through the deep mud, had their ears filled with the loud complaining of the wheels, and this, you may well know, made the work so much the harder to endure. "Silence!" the oxen cried at last out of patience. "What have you wheels to complain about so loudly? We are drawing all the weight, not you, and we are keeping still about it besides. They complain most who suffer least." The Shepherd Boy and the Wolf. A shepherd boy tended his master's sheep near a dark forest not far from the village. Soon he found life in the pasture very dull. All he could do to amuse himself was to talk to his dog or play on his shepherd's pipe. One day, as he sat watching the sheep and the quiet forest, and thinking what he would do should he see a wolf, he thought of a plan to amuse himself. His master had told him to call for help should a wolf attack the flock, and the villager would drive it away. So now, though he had not seen anything that even looked like a wolf, he ran toward the village shouting at the top of his voice, "Wolf! Wolf!" As he expected, the villagers who heard the cry dropped their work and ran in great excitement to the pasture. But when they got there, they found the boy doubled up with laughter at the trick he had played on them. A few days later, the shepherd boy again shouted, "Wolf! Wolf!" Again, the villagers ran to help him, only to be laughed at again. Then, one evening, as the sun was setting behind the forest, and the shadows were creeping out over the pasture, Wolf really did spring from the underbrush and fall upon the sheep. In terror, the boy ran towards the village, shouting, "Wolf! Wolf!" But though the villagers heard the cry, they did not run to help him as they had before. "He cannot fool us again," they said. The wolf killed a great many of the boy's sheep, and then slipped away into the forest unharmed. Liars are not believed, even when they speak the truth. The Farmer and the Stork. A stork of a very simple and trusting nature had been asked by a gay party of cranes to visit a field that had been newly planted. But the party ended dismally, with all the birds entangled in the meshes of the farmer's net. The stork begged the farmer to spare him. "Please, let me go," he pleaded. "I belong to the stork family, who you know are honest and birds of good character. Besides, I did not know the cranes were going to steal." "You may be a very good bird," answered the farmer, "but I caught you with thieving cranes, and you will have to share the same punishment with them. You are judged by the company you keep." The Sheep and the Pig. One day a shepherd discovered a fat pig in the meadow where his sheep were pastured. He very quickly captured the porker. I love that. The porker, okay. Which squealed at the top of his voice the moment the shepherd laid his hands on it. You would have thought to hear the loud squealing that the pig was being cruelly hurt, but in spite of its squeals and struggles to escape, the shepherd tucked his prize under his arm and started off to the butcher's in the market-place. The sheep in the pasture were much astonished and amused at the pig's behaviour, and followed the shepherd and his charge to the pasture gate. "What makes you squeal like that?" asked one of the sheep. "The shepherd often catches and carries off one of us, but we should feel very much ashamed to make such a terrible fuss about it like you do." "That is all very well," replied the pig, with a squeal and a frantic kick. When he catches you, he is only after your wool, but he wants my bacon. Whee! It is easy to be brave when there is no danger. Ooh, another animation. Click on the orange purse. The sound effects are amazing. Alright, the travelers and the purse. Two men were traveling in company along the road when one of them picked up a well-filled purse. How lucky I am, he said. I have found a purse. Judging by its weight, it must be full of gold. Do not say, I have found a purse, said his companion. Say rather, we have found a purse, and how lucky we are. Travelers ought to share alike the fortunes of misfortunes of the road. No, no, replied the other angrily. I found it, and I am going to keep it. Just then they heard a shout of "Stop, thief!" and looking around saw a mob of people armed with clubs coming down the road. The man who had found the purse fell into a panic. We are lost if they find the We are lost if they find the purse on us, he cried. No, no, replied the other. You would not say we before, so now stick to your I. Say I am lost. We cannot expect anyone to share our misfortunes unless we are willing to share a good fortune also. The Lion and Ass. One day, as the lion walked proudly down a forest aisle, and the animals respectfully made way for him, an ass brayed a scornful remark as he passed. The lion felt a flash of anger, but when he turned his head and saw who had spoken, he walked quietly on. He would not honor the fool with even so much as a stroke of his claws. Do not resent the remarks of a fool. Ignore them. Ooh. Is this a crane with a crown? Love to see it. Oh. Murdering the frogs, okay. The frogs who wished for a king. The frogs were tired of governing themselves. They had so much freedom that it had spoiled them, and they did nothing but sit around croaking in a bored manner and wishing for a government that could entertain them with the pomp and display of royalty, and rule them in a way to make them know that they were being ruled. No milk and water government for them, they declared, so they sent a petition to Jupiter asking for a king. Jupiter saw what simple and foolish creatures they were, but to keep them quiet and make them think that they had a king, he threw down a huge log, which fell into the water with a great splash. The frogs hid themselves among the reeds and grasses, thinking the new king to be some fearful giant, but they soon discovered how tame and peaceable King Log was. In a short time, the younger frogs were using him for a dining platform, while the older frogs made him a meeting place, where they complained loudly to Jupiter about the government. To teach the frogs a lesson, the ruler of the gods now sent a crane to be king of Frogland. The crane proved to be a very different sort of king from old King Log. He gobbled up the poor frogs right and left, and they soon saw what fools they had been. In mournful croaks they begged Jupiter to take away the cruel tyrant before they should all be destroyed. How now, cried Jupiter, are you not yet content? You have what you asked for, and so you have only yourselves to blame for your misfortunes. Be sure you can better your condition before you seek to change. And I'm going to double check that I'm not muted. Cool, I am not muted. Perfect. Alright. Lovely little wolf. The wolf and a shadow. A wolf left his lair one evening in fine spirits and an excellent appetite. As he ran, the setting sun cast a shadow far out on the ground, and it looked as if the wolf were 100 times bigger than he really was. Why, exclaimed the wolf proudly, see how big I am? Fancy me running away from a puny lion. I'll show him who is fit to be king, he or I. Just then an immense shadow blotted him out entirely, and the next instant a lion struck him down with a single blow. Do not let your fancy make you forget realities. Ooh, the rat and the elephant. A rat was traveling along the king's highway. He was a very proud rat, considering his small size and the bad reputations all rats have. As Mr. Rat walked along, he kept mostly to the ditch. He noticed a great commotion up the road, and soon a grand procession came in view. It was the king and his retinue. The king rode on a huge elephant adorned with the most gorgeous trappings. With the king in his luxurious howdah were the royal dog and cat. A great crowd of people followed the procession. They were so taken up with admiration of the elephant that the rat was not noticed. His pride was hurt. "What fools!" he cried. "Look at me and you will soon forget that clumsy elephant. Is it his great size that makes your eyes pop out? Or is it his wrinkled hide? Why, I have eyes and ears and as many legs as he. I am of just as much importance, and—" But just then the royal cat spied him, and the next instant the rat knew he was not quite so important as an elephant. A resemblance to the great in some things does not make us great. Alright, the boys and the frogs. Some boys were playing one day at the edge of a pond in which lived a family of frogs. The boys amused themselves by throwing stones into the pond so as to make them skip on top of the water. The stones were flying thick and fast, and the boys were enjoying themselves very much. But the poor frogs in the pond were trembling with fear. And last one of the frogs, the oldest and bravest, put his head out of the water and said, "Oh, please, dear children, stop your cruel play. Though it may be fun for you, it means death to us. Always stop to think whether your fun may not be the cause of another's unhappiness." Oh no. Okay, at least it didn't show frogs dying. You know, this is for children anyway, so that's good. Okay. The Ants and the Grasshopper. One bright day in late autumn, a family of ants were bustling about in the warm sunshine, trying out the grain they had stored up during the summer, when a starving grasshopper, his fiddle under his arm, came up and humbly begged for a bite to eat. "What?" cried the ants in surprise. "Haven't you stored anything away for the winter? What in the world were you doing all last summer?" "I didn't have time to store up any food," whined the grasshopper. "I was so busy making music that before I knew it, the summer was gone." The ants shrugged their shoulders in disgust. "Making music, were you?" they cried. "Very well. Now dance." And they turned their backs on the grasshopper and went on with their work. There's a time for work and a time for play. The Ass Carrying the Image. A sacred image was being carried to the temple. It was mounted on an ass adorned with garlands and gorgeous trappings, and a grand procession of priests and pages followed it. Through the streets, as the ass walked along, the people bowed their heads reverently or fell on their knees, and the ass thought the honor was being paid to himself. With his head full of this foolish idea, he became so puffed up with pride and vanity that he halted and started to bray loudly. But in the midst of his song, his driver guessed what the ass had got into his head, and began to beat him unmercifully, oh no, with a stick. "Go along with you, you stupid ass," he cried. "The honor is not meant for you, but for the image you are carrying. Do not try to take the credit to yourself. That is due to others. And this is why you shouldn't repost art, and if you do, always credit the artist, otherwise you're gonna get beaten with a stick. That is the lesson I am taking from this story. In short, credit your artists." Okay. Ooh, a raven and a swan. A raven, which you know is black as coal, was envious of the swan, because her feathers were as white as the purest snow. The foolish bird got the idea that if he lived like the swan, swimming and diving all day long, and eating the weeds and plants that grow in the water, his feathers would turn white like the swan's. So he left his home in the woods and fields, and flew down to live on the lakes and in the marshes. But though he washed and washed all day long, almost drowning himself at it, His feathers remained as black as ever, and as the water weeds he ate did not agree with him, he got thinner and thinner, and at last he died. A change of habits will not alter nature. The Ass and the Load of Salt. A merchant driving his ass homeward from the seashore with a heavy load of salt came to a river crossed by a shallow ford. They had crossed this river many times before without accident, but this time the ass slipped and fell when halfway over, and when the merchant at last got him to his feet, much of the salt had melted away. Delighted to find how much lighter his burden had become, the ass finished the journey very gaily. Next day the merchant went for another load of salt. On the way home, the ass, remembering what had happened at the ford, purposely let himself fall into the water, and again got rid of most of his burden. The angry merchant immediately turned about and drove the ass back to the seashore, where he loaded him with 2 great baskets of sponges. At the ford, the ass again tumbled over, but when he had scrambled to his feet, it was a very disconsolate ass that dragged himself homeward under a load 10 times heavier than before. The same measures will not suit all circumstances. Poor donkey. The Lion and the Gnat. Ooh, animation. Click on the orange gnat to begin. Rip the gnat. The Lion and the Gnat. Away with you, vile insect, said a lion angrily to a gnat that was buzzing around his head, but the gnat was not in the least disturbed. Do you think, he said, spitefully to the lion, that I am afraid of you because they call you king? The next instant he flew at the lion and stung him sharply on the nose. Mad with rage, the lion struck fiercely at the gnat, but only succeeded in tearing himself with his claws. Again and again the gnat stung the lion, who now was roaring terribly. At last, worn out with rage and covered with wounds that his own teeth and claws had made, the lion gave up the fight. The gnat buzzed away to tell the whole world about his victory, but instead he flew straight into a spider's web. And there he who had defeated the king of beasts came to a miserable end, the prey of a little spider. The least of our enemies is often the most to be feared. Pride over success should not throw us off our guard. The Leap at Rhodes. A certain man who visited foreign lands could talk of little when he returned to his home, except the wonderful adventures he had met with and the great deeds he had done abroad. One of the feats he told about was a leap he had made in a city called Rhodes. That leap was so great, he said, that no other man could leap anywhere near the distance. A great many persons in Rhodes had seen him do it. It would prove that what he told was true. No need of witnesses, said one of the hearers. Suppose the city is Rhodes. Now show us how far you can jump. Deeds count, not boasting words. The Chicken and the Jewel. A chicken was busily scratching and scraping about to find something to eat for himself and his family, when he happened to turn up a precious jewel that had been lost by its owner. Aha, said the chicken, no doubt you are very costly, and he who lost you would give a great deal to find you. But as for me, I would choose a single grain of barley corn before all the jewels in the world. Precious things are without value to those who cannot prize them. Ooh, lots of animals here. Camel, elephant, lion, monkey, some kind of bird, and a cheetah, I think, or a jaguar. The Monkey and the Camel. At a great celebration in honor of King Lion, the monkey was asked to dance for the company. His dancing was very clever indeed, and the animals were all highly pleased with his grace and lightness. The praise that was showered on the monkey made the camel envious. He was very sure that he could dance quite as well as the monkey, if not better. So he pushed his way into the crowd that was gathered around the monkey, and rising on his hind legs began to dance. He looked so funky, I love it. But the big bulking camel made himself very ridiculous as he kicked out his naughty legs and twisted his clumsy long neck. Besides, the animal found it hard to keep their toes from under his heavy hooves. At last, when one of his huge feet came within an inch of King Lion's nose, the animals were so disgusted that they set upon the camel in a rage and drove him out into the desert. Shortly afterward, refreshments consisting mostly, of camel's hump and ribs were served to the company. Do not try to ape your betters. That's a yikes. The Ass, the Fox, and the Lion. An ass and a fox had become close comrades, and were constantly in each other's company. While the ass cropped a fresh bit of greens, the fox would devour a chicken from the neighboring farmyard, or a bit of cheese filched from the dairy. One day the pair unexpectedly met a lion. The ass was very much frightened, but the fox calmed his fears. "I will talk to him," he said. So the fox walked boldly up to the lion. "Your Highness," he said in an undertone, so the ass could not hear him, "I've got a fine scheme in my head. If you promise not to hurt me, I will lead that foolish creature yonder into a pit where he can't get out, and you can feast at your pleasure." The lion agreed, and the fox returned to the ass. I made him promise not to hurt us," said the fox. "But come, I know a good place to hide till he is gone." So the fox led the ass into a deep pit. But when the lion saw that the ass was his for the taking, he first of all struck down the traitor fox. Traitors may expect treachery, as they should. Alright, what time is it? 9:27. Alright, cool. And once again, I hope you guys are enjoying the 35 follower special stream. My name's Ellie, and yeah, that's about it. And we're just reading, what's it called? Aesop Fables, and if anyone wants to recommend any poetry pieces that aren't heavily copyrighted, let me know. I'll search them up on Google and we can give them a read. Okay. The birds, the beasts, and the bat. Alright. The birds and the beasts declared war against each other. No compromise was possible, and so they went at it tooth and claw. It is said the quarrel grew out of the persecution the race of geese suffered at the teeth of the fox family. The beast, too, had cause for fight. The eagle was constantly pouncing on the hare, and the owl dined daily on mice. It was a terrible battle. Many a hare and many a mouse died. Chickens and geese fell by the score, and the victor always stopped for a feast. Now the bat family had not openly joined either side. They were a very politic race, so when they saw the birds getting the better of it, they were birds for all there was in it. But when the tide of battle turned, they immediately sided with the beasts. When the battle was over, the conduct of the bats was discussed at the peace conference. Such deceit was unpardonable, and birds and beasts made common cause to drive out the bats. And since then, the bat family hides in dark towers and deserted ruins, flying out only in the night. The deceitful have no friends. Something to think about. Click on the orange fox to begin. Again with the fantastic sound effects. The lion, the bear, and the fox. Just as a great bear rushed to seize a stray kid, a lion leaped from another direction upon the same prey. The two fought furiously for the prize until they had received so many wounds that both sank down unable to continue the battle. Just then, a fox dashed up and seizing the kid, made off with it as fast as he could go, while the lion and the bear looked on in helpless rage. How much better it would have been, they said, to have shared in friendly spirit. Those who have all the toil do not always get the profit. The wolf and the lamb. A stray lamb stood drinking early one morning on the bank of a woodland stream. That very same morning, a hungry wolf came by farther up the stream, hunting for something to eat. He soon got his eyes on the lamb. As a rule, Mr. Wolf snapped up such delicious morsels without making any bones about it. But this lamb looked so very helpless and innocent that the wolf felt he ought to have some kind of an excuse for taking its life. How dare you paddle around in my stream and stir up all the mud?" he shouted fiercely. "You deserve to be punished severely for your rashness." "But your Highness," replied the trembling lamb, "do not be angry. I cannot possibly muddy the water you are drinking up there. Remember, you are upstream, and I am downstream." "You do muddy it," retorted the wolf savagely. "And besides, I have heard that you told lies about me last year." "How could I have done so?" pleaded the lamb. "I wasn't born until this year." "If it wasn't you, it was your brother." "I have no brothers." "Well then," snarled the wolf, "it was someone in your family anyway. But no matter who it was, I do not intend to be talked out of my breakfast." And without more words, the wolf seized the poor lamb and carried her off to the forest. The tyrant can always find an excuse for his tyranny. The unjust will not listen to the reasoning of the innocent. The wolf and the sheep, similar to the last story. A wolf had been hurt in a fight with a bear. He was unable to move and could not satisfy his hunger and thirst. A sheep passed by near his hiding place, and the wolf called to him. "Please, fetch me a drink of water," he begged. "That might give me strength enough so I can get me some solid food." "Solid food," said the sheep. "That means me, I suppose. If I should bring you a drink, it would only serve to wash me down your throat. Don't talk to me about a drink." A knave's hypocrisy is easily seen through. Alright. The hares and the frogs. Hares, as you know, are very timid. The least shadow sends them scurrying in fright to a hiding place. Once they decided to die rather than live in such misery. But while they were debating how best to meet death, they thought they heard a noise, and in a flash were scampering off to the warren. On the way they passed a pond where a family of frogs was sitting among the reeds on the bank. In an instant the startled frogs were seeking safety in the mud. "Look!" cried a hare. "Things are not so bad after all, for here are creatures who are even afraid of us. However unfortunate we may think we are, there is always someone worse off than ourselves." Alright, we have about 28 minutes before the end of stream, just letting everyone know. Okay. The Travelers and the Sea. Two travelers were walking along the seashore. Far out they saw something riding on the waves. "Look," said one, "a great ship rides in from distant lands, bearing rich treasures." The object they saw came ever nearer the shore. "No," said the other, "that is not a treasure ship. That is some fisherman's skiff, with a day's catch of savoury fish." Still nearer came the object. The waves washed it up on shore. "It is a chest of gold, lost from some wreck," they cried. Both travellers rushed to the beach, but there they found nothing but a water-soaked log. Do not let your hopes carry you away from reality. The Wolf and the Lion. A wolf had stolen a lamb and was carrying it off to his lair to eat. But his plans were very much changed when he met a lion, who without making any excuses took the lamb away from him. The wolf made off to a safe distance and then said in a much injured tone, "You have no right to take my property like that." The lion looked back, but as the wolf was too far away to be taught a lesson without too much inconvenience, he said, "Your property? Did you buy it, or did the shepherd make you a gift of it? Pray tell me, how did you get it? What is evil won is evil lost." The Peacock. This one's a long one. Oh, not too long, actually. The peacock, they say, did not at first have the beautiful feathers in which he now takes so much pride. These, Juno, whose favourite he was, granted to him one day when he begged her for a train of feathers to distinguish him from the other birds. Then, decked in his finery, gleaming with emerald, gold, purple, and azure, he strutted proudly amongst the birds. All regarded him with envy. Even the most beautiful pheasant could see that his beauty was surpassed. Presently, the peacock saw an eagle soaring high up in the blue sky and felt a desire to fly, and as he had been accustomed to do, lifting his wings he tried to rise from the ground, but the weight of his magnificent train held him down. Instead of flying up to greet the first rays of the morning sun, or to bathe in the rosy light amongst the floating clouds at sunset, he would have to walk the ground more encumbered and oppressed than any common barnyard fowl. Do not sacrifice your freedom for the sake of pomp and show. I feel like peacocks can still fly though, just not as, well. Anyways, I'm not going to think about it too much. The mice and the weasels. The weasels and the mice were always up in arms against each other. In every battle the weasels carried off the victory, as well as a large number of the mice, which they ate for dinner next day. In despair the mice called a council, and there it was decided the mouse army was always beaten because it had no leaders. So a large number of generals and commanders were appointed from among the most eminent mice. To distinguish themselves from the soldiers in the ranks, the new leaders proudly bound on their heads lofty crests and ornaments of feathers or straw. Then, after long preparation of the mouse army and all the arts of war, they sent a challenge to the weasels. The weasels accepted the challenge with eagerness, for they were always ready for a fight when a meal was in sight. They immediately attacked the mouse army in large numbers. Soon the mouse line gave way before the attack, and the whole army fled for cover. The privates easily slipped into their holes, but the mouse leaders could not squeeze through the narrow openings because of their headdresses. Not one escaped the teeth of the hungry weasels. Greatness has its penalties. Okay. The Wolf and the Lean Dog. A wolf prowling near a village one evening met a dog. It happened to be a very lean and bony dog, and Master Wolf would have turned up his nose at such meagre fare had he not been more hungry than usual. So he began to edge towards the dog, while the dog backed away. "Let me remind your lordship," said the dog, his words interrupted now and then as he dodged a snap of the wolf's teeth, "how unpleasant it would be to eat me now. Look at my ribs. I have nothing but skin and bone. But let me tell you something in private. In a few days my master will give a wedding feast for his only daughter. You can guess how fine and fat I will grow on the scraps from the table. Then is the time to eat me." The wolf could not help thinking how nice it would be to have a fine fat dog to eat instead of the scrawny object before him. So he went away, pulling in his belt and promising to return. Some days later the wolf came back for the promised feast. He found the dog in his master's yard and asked him to come out and be eaten. "Sir," said the dog with a grin, "I shall be delighted to have you eat me. I'll be out as soon as the porter opens the door." But the porter was a huge dog, whom the wolf knew by painful experience to be very unkind towards wolves. So he decided not to wait, and made off as fast as his legs could carry him. Do not depend on the promises of those whose interest it is to deceive you. Alright, we got a few more left. Well, Aesop probably has like hundreds left, but we have 22 minutes, so yeah, just a couple more. The Fox and the Lion. A very young fox who had never before seen a lion happened to meet one in the forest. A single look was enough to send the fox off at top speed for the nearest hiding place. The second time the fox saw the lion he stopped behind a tree to look at him a moment before slinking away. But the third time the fox went boldly up to the lion without turning a hair, said, "Hello there, old top." Familiarity breeds contempt. Acquaintance with evil blinds us to its dangers. Boo, the Dog and His Master's Dinner. A dog had learned to carry his master's dinner to him every day. He was very faithful to his duty, though the smell of the good things in the basket did tempt him. The dogs in the neighborhood noticed him carrying the basket and soon discovered what was in it. They made several attempts to steal it from him, but he always guarded it faithfully. Then one day all the dogs in the neighborhood got together and met him on his way with the basket. The dog tried to run away from them, but at the last second he stopped to argue. That was his mistake. They soon made him feel so ridiculous that he dropped the basket and seized a large piece of roast meat intended for his master's dinner. "Very well," he said, "you divide the rest. Do not stop to argue with temptation." Ooh, pretty bird. Let's click on it. Ooh, it's a jackdaw, okay. Trying to dress up like a peacock. Looks pretty swanky. Oh. Yikes. Wasn't expecting that, okay. Alright. A jackdaw chanced to fly over the garden of the king's palace. There he saw with much wonder and envy a flock of royal peacocks in all the glory of their splendid plumage. Now the black jackdaw was not a very handsome bird, nor very refined in manner, yet he imagined that all he needed to make himself fit for the society of the peacocks was a dress like theirs. So he picked up some cast-off feathers of the peacocks and stuck them among his own black plumes. Dressed in his borrowed finery, he strutted loftily among the birds of his own kind. Then he flew down into the garden among the peacocks. But they soon saw who he was. Angry at the cheat, they flew at him, plucking away the borrowed feathers and also some of his own. The poor jackdaw returned sadly to his former companions. There, another unpleasant surprise awaited him. They had not forgotten his superior airs towards them, and, to punish him, they drove him away with a rain of pecks and jeers. Borrowed feathers do not make fine birds. The Monkey and the Dolphin. It happened once upon a time that a certain Greek ship bound for Athens was wrecked off the coast close to Piraeus, the port of Athens. Had it not been for the dolphins, who at that time were very friendly toward mankind, and especially toward Athenians, all would have perished. But the dolphins took the shipwrecked people on their backs and swam with them to shore. Now it was the custom among Greeks to take their pet monkeys and dogs with them whenever they went on a voyage. So when one of the dolphins saw a monkey struggling in the water, he thought it was a man and made the monkey climb up on his back. Then off he swam with him toward the shore. The monkey sat up, grave and dignified, on the dolphin's back. "You are a citizen of illustrious Athens, are you not?" asked the dolphin politely. "Yes," answered the monkey proudly. "My family is one of the noblest in the city." "Indeed," said the dolphin. "Then of course you often visit Piraeus." "Yes, yes," replied the monkey. "Indeed, I do. I am with him constantly. Piraeus is my very best friend." This answer took the dolphin by surprise, and turning his head, he now saw what it was he was carrying. Without more ado, he dived and left the foolish monkey to take care of himself, while he swam off in search of some human being to save. One falsehood leads to another. The Wolf and the Ass. An ass was feeding in a pasture near a wood when he saw a wolf lurking in the shadows along the hedge. He easily guessed what the wolf had in mind, and thought of a plan to save himself. So he pretended he was lame, and began to hobble painfully. When the wolf came up, he asked the ass what had made him lame, and the ass replied that he had stepped on a sharp thorn. "Please pull it out," he pleaded, groaning as if in pain. "If you do not, it might stick in your throat when you eat me." The wolf saw the wisdom of the advice, for he wanted to enjoy his meal without any danger of choking. So the ass lifted up his foot, and the wolf began to search very closely and carefully for the thorn. Just then the ass kicked out with all of his might, tumbling the wolf a dozen paces away, and while the wolf was getting very slowly and painfully to his feet, the ass galloped away in safety. "Serves me right," growled the wolf as he crept into the bushes. "I'm a butcher by trade, not a doctor. Stick to your trade." The Monkey and the Cat. Once upon a time, a cat and a monkey lived as pets in the same house. They were great friends and were constantly in all sorts of mischief together. What they seemed to think of more than anything else was to get something to eat, and it did not matter much to them how they got it. One day they were sitting by the fire, watching some chestnuts roasting on the hearth. How to get them was the question. I would gladly get them, said the cunning monkey, but you are much skillful at such things than I am. Pull them out and I'll divide them between us. The cat stretched out her paw very carefully, pushed aside some of the cinders, and drew back her paw very quickly. Then she tried it again, this time pulling a chestnut half out of the fire. A third time, and she drew out the chestnut. The performance she went through several times, each time singeing her paws severely. As fast as she pulled the chestnuts out of the fire, the monkey ate them up. Now the master came in, and away scampered the rascals. Mistress Cat with a burnt paw and no chestnuts. From that time on, they say, she contented herself with mice and rats, and had little to do with Sir Monkey. The flatterer seeks some benefit at your expense. The Dogs and the Fox. This one's very short. Some dogs found the skin of a lion and furiously began to tear it with their teeth. A fox chanced to see them and laughed scornfully. If that lion had been alive, he said, it would have been a very different story. He would have made you feel how much sharper his claws are than your teeth. It is easy and also contemptible to kick a man that is down. Oh wait, are we out of stories? The next button isn't working. What the heck? Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. Click on the orange dog to begin. Sure thing. Nice slurping noises. Okay. The dogs and the hides. Some hungry dogs saw a number of hides at the bottom of a stream, where the tanner had put them to soak. A fine hide makes an excellent meal for a hungry dog. But the water was deep, and the dogs could not reach the hides from the bank. So they held a council and decided that the very best thing to do was to drink up the river. All fell to lapping up the water as fast as they could, but though they drank and drank until, one after another, all of them had burst with drinking, still for all their efforts the water in the river remained as high as ever. Do not try to do impossible things. The Rabbit, the Weasel, and the Cat. A rabbit left his home one day for a dinner of clover, but he forgot to latch the door of his house, and while he was gone a weasel walked in and calmly made himself at home. When this rabbit returned, there was the weasel's nose sticking out of the rabbit's own doorway, sniffing the fine air. The rabbit was quite angry, for a rabbit, and requested the weasel to move out. But the weasel was perfectly content. He was settled down for good. A wise old cat heard the dispute and offered to settle it. Come close to me, said the cat. I am very deaf. Put your mouths close to my ears while you tell me the facts. The unsuspecting pair did as they were told, and in an instant the cat had them both under her claws. No one could deny that the dispute had been definitely settled. The strong are apt to settle questions to their own advantage. The Bear and the Bees. Oh, another animation. Love that. A bear, roaming the woods in search of berries, happened on a fallen tree in which a swarm of bees had stored their honey. The bear began to nose around the log very carefully to find out if the bees were at home. Just then one of the swarm came home from the clover field with a load of sweets. Guessing what the bear was after, the bee flew at him, stung him sharply, and then disappeared into the hollow log. The bear lost his temper in an instant, and sprang upon the log tooth and claw to destroy the nest. But this only brought out the whole swarm. The poor bear had to take to his heels, and he was about to save himself only by diving into a pool of water. It is wiser to bear a single injury in silence than to provoke 1,000 by flying into a rage. And we got 11 more minutes here. The Dog in the Manger. The Dog in the Manger. A dog asleep in a manger filled with hay was awakened by the cattle, which came in tired and hungry from working in the field, but the dog would not let them get near the manger, and snarled and snapped as if it were filled with the best of meat and bones all for himself. The cattle looked at the dog in disgust. How selfish he is, said one. He cannot eat the hay, and yet he will not let us eat it. He will not let us eat it, who are so hungry for it. Now the farmer came in. When he saw how the dog was acting, he seized a stick and drove him out of the stable, with many a blow for his selfish behavior. Don't beat your dogs, what the heck? Instead, train them to do better, in, regular ways. Do not grudge others what you cannot enjoy yourself. Alright, I need some water. Okay. The Wolf and the Goat. A hungry wolf spied a goat browsing at the top of a steep cliff where he could not possibly get at her. That is a very dangerous place for you, he called out, pretending to be very anxious about the goat's safety. What if you should fall? Please, listen to me and come down. Here you can get all you want of the finest, tenderest grass in the country. The goat looked over the edge of the cliff. How very, very anxious you are about me, she said, and how generous you are with your grass. But I know you. It's your own appetite you are thinking of, not mine. An invitation prompted by selfishness is not to be accepted. The Ass and the Grasshoppers. One day, as an ass was walking in the pasture, he found some grasshoppers chirping merrily in a grassy corner of the field. He listened with a great deal of admiration to the song of the grasshoppers. It was such a joyful song that his pleasure-loving heart was filled with a wish to sing as they did. What is it, he asked very respectfully, that has given you such a beautiful voice? Is there any special food you eat? Or is it some divine nectar that makes you sing so wonderfully? Yes, said the grasshoppers, who were very fond of a joke. It is the dew we drink. Try some and see. So thereafter, the ass would eat nothing and drink nothing but dew. Naturally, the poor foolish ass soon died. The laws of nature are unchangeable. God, he just wanted to sing, man. What the heck? That's messed up. Okay, the mule. A mule had had a long rest and much good feeding. He was feeling very vigorous indeed, and pranced around loftily, holding his head high. My father certainly was a full-blooded racer, he said. I can feel that distinctively. Next day he was put into harness again, and that evening he was very downhearted indeed. I was mistaken, he said. My father was an ass after all. Be sure of your pedigree before you boast of it. The Cat, the Chicken, and the Young Mouse. Oh, click on the rooster to begin. A very young mouse, who had never seen anything of the world, almost came to grief the very first time he ventured out. And this is the story he told his mother about his adventures. I was strolling along very peaceably, when just as I turned the corner into the next yard, I saw two strange creatures. One of them had a very kind and gracious look, but the other was the most fearful monster you can imagine. You should have seen him. On top of his head, and in front of his neck, hung pieces of raw red meat. He walked about restlessly, tearing up the ground with his toes, and beating his arms savagely against his sides. The moment he caught sight of me, he opened his pointed mouth as if to swallow me, and then he let out a piercing roar that frightened me almost to death. Can you guess who it was that a young mouse was trying to describe to his mother? It was nobody but the barnyard chicken, and the first one the little mouse had ever seen. If it had not been for that terrible monster, the mouse went on, I should have made the acquaintance of the pretty creature, who looked so good and gentle. He had thick, velvety fur, and a meek face, and a look that was very modest. Though his eyes were bright and shining, as he looked at me, he waved his fine long tail, and smiled. I am sure he was just about to speak to me when the monster I have told you about let out a screaming yell, and I ran for my life. My son, said the mother mouse, that gentle creature you saw was none other than the cat. Under his kindly appearance, he bears a grudge against every one of us. The other was nothing but a bird, who wouldn't harm you in the least. As for the cat, he eats us. So be thankful, my child, that you escaped with your life, and as long as you live, Never judge people by their looks. Do not trust alone to outward appearances. The Wolf and the Shepherd. A wolf had been prowling around a flock of sheep for a long time, and the shepherd watched very anxiously to prevent him from carrying off a lamb. But the wolf did not try to do any harm. Instead, he seemed to be helping the shepherd take care of the sheep. At last the shepherd got so used to seeing the wolf about that he forgot how wicked he could be. One day, he even went so far as to leave his flock in the wolf's care, while he went on an errand. But when he came back and saw how many of the flock had been killed and carried off, he knew how foolish to trust a wolf. Once a wolf, always a wolf. The peacock and the crane. A peacock, puffed up with vanity, met a crane one day to impress him, spread his gorgeous tail in the sun. "Look," he said, what have you to compare with this? I am dressed in all the glory of the rainbow, while your feathers are gray as dust." The crane spread his broad wings and flew up toward the sun. "Follow me if you can," he said, but the peacock stood where he was among the birds of the barnyard, while the crane soared in freedom far up into the blue sky. The useful is of much more importance and value than the ornamental. Alright, this might be the last one because it is 9:57 and I got like 3 more minutes. Hold on, let's see. Yep, I'm correct. Some cranes saw a farmer ploughing a large field. When the work of ploughing was done, they patiently watched him sow the seed. It was their feast, they thought. So as soon as the farmer had finished planting and had gone home, down they flew to the field and began to eat as fast as they could. Oh no! The farmer, of course, knew the cranes and their ways. He had experience with such birds before. He soon returned to the field with a sling, but he did not bring any stones with him. He expected to scare the cranes just by swinging the sling in the air and shouting loudly at them. At first the cranes flew away in great terror, but they soon began to see that none of them ever got hurt. They did not even hear the noise of stones whizzing through the air, and as for words, they would kill nobody. At last they paid no attention whatsoever to the farmer. The farmer saw that he would have to take other measures. He wanted to save at least some of his grain. So he loaded his sling with stones and killed several of the cranes. This had the effect the farmer wanted. For from that day, the cranes visited his field no more. Bluff and threatening words are of little value with rascals. Bluff is no proof that hard fists are lacking. Okay. The farmer and his sons. A rich old farmer who felt that he had not many more days to live, called his sons to his bedside. "My sons," he said, "heed what I have to say to you. Do not on any account part with the estate that has belonged to our family for so many generations. Somewhere on it is hidden a rich treasure. I do not know the exact spot, but it is there, and you will surely find it. Spare no energy and leave no spot unturned in your search." The father died, and no sooner was he in his grave than the sons set to work digging with all their might, turning up every foot of ground with their spades, and going over the whole farm 2 or 3 times. No hidden gold did they find. But at harvest time, when they had settled their accounts, and pocketed a rich profit far greater than that of any of their neighbors, they understood that the treasure their father had told them about was the wealth of a bountiful crop, and that in their industry had they found the treasure. Industry is a treasure itself. Oh wait, I read that wrong, sorry. Industry is itself a treasure. Alright, and with that was the last story that I'm going to be reading tonight. That was Elemental Owlets, that's me, I'm Ellie. That was my 35 follower special. And if you enjoyed any of this reading, hopefully you enjoyed my voice, then consider following me. And if you don't want to follow me, that's quite alright. But with that, I'm saying goodnight. Alright, goodbye everyone.